Welcome to another S&P 500 Trade Watch analysis video. Today is July 24, 2022. In this video, I will share with you my analysis and price scenario for the S&P 500 ETF, the SPY, the NASDAQ 100 ETF, the QQQ, and the Russell 2000 ETF, IWM. In addition, I will also share with you my analysis on Apple and Tesla and the FAANG stock that are scheduled to report their earnings next week. Stay tuned. Before I begin, if you find this video to be useful and informative and like to see more of these videos, click to subscribe to this channel and be sure to smash the thumbs up to help me promote this video on YouTube. We're going to start reviewing the price action from previous week on the ETF and also on Apple and Tesla. Then we will proceed on looking at the coming week price scenario for the ETF, Apple and Tesla, and the projected price move for the FAANG stock that are scheduled to report earnings next week: Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Amazon. Let's review what happened last week for the ETF and also Apple and Tesla. Starting with the SPY, the ETF for the S&P 500. The scenario on the downside we're looking for was to come up to this resistance zone and then pull back and test this resistance support area and see would it get a little chop and then give us a short setup and then short it down to this expected range, the lower expected range. And the upside scenario was to come up to this resistance zone, pull back, do a little bit of a back test, and came down to this virgin point of control and get a bounce off of that and push us up to the upper expected range. And as it turned out, we did see a little bit of a shake and bake and then play out the upside scenario. So on Monday, it actually came down and test this resistance support area, but it did not give us that setup for the potential short. Instead, on Tuesday, it gap up and moved to this resistance zone and up to the expected range on a follow through. Then it kind of chopped around this resistance area, certain support area now, and then pushes up. And now it's basically came back in on Friday and sit right near the upper edge of the expected range, and basically sitting above this resistance area turn support now. And looking at the QQQ, the downside scenario was for it to come up to the upper edge of this high volume area and then push back down and dip back below this high volume zone and see would it get a failed back test and look for a short setup and short it down to the lower expected range. And the upside scenario was that it break above this high volume zone and into this resistance area, pull back, do a little bit of back test, see could we find support on this virgin point of control, and then pushes up into the upper expected range. And as you can see, similarly to the SPY, got a little bit of a shake and bake. It came up to this edge of the high volume zone and then pulled back to the lower edge of this high volume zone. But again, on Tuesday, it gap up, so we'll never do a little bit of a back testing down here to give us an opportunity to look for a potential short setup. Instead, it booked to this upper edge of this high volume zone and into the resistance zone here. Then on Wednesday, it just followed through and moved to this upper range of the expected move, and then chop around and then came up to this virgin point of control on Thursday, and on Friday pulled back in to this upper range of the expected move and closed right near the upper edge of this expected range, upper expected range. And for the IWM, the Russell 2000 ETF, the downside scenario was for a price to come up to this resistance zone, then it get rejected and come back down, and then we look for a short setup to short it down to the lower expected range. And the upside scenarios were to break this resistance zone, come up and get a little bit of a rejection from this virgin point of control, push back and back test this resistance area, and push up to the expected move upper range. So you can see that it too did a little bit of a shake and bake, it came up and moved up above this resistance zone. Then it came back down and tested the edge of this resistance support area. But again, it also gapped up on the following day, just like the SPY and the QQQ, and it moved to this upper edge of this high volume zone and into the upper range of the expected move. Then on on Wednesday, it just kind of followed through and came up to this resistance area and basically chopped around. And then on Friday, came back down and closed right above, a little bit above this expected move upper range. And for Apple, we were looking for Apple to come up to this resistance area and get a rejection and push us back down to this composite point of control and see would it get a little bit of a bounce. Then when we get bounced, then we'll look for a little bit of a short location to come back down when it break this composite point of control and trace it down and short it down to this lower edge of this expected range, the lower expected range, and basically come down to test this support area here and the high volume zone here, also this trend line. And we will look forward to see would it be able to hold this support and bounce back up. And on the upside, it was come up to this resistance zone and then come back down, back test it on this version point of control, and then push up to the upper range of the expected move. And as you can see, it didn't quite happen the way that the upside scenario. Instead, it came down and held above this composite point of control. Then it pushes back up to the upper edge of this high volume zone and booked to the resistance area. Then it proceed to move up to this upper range of the expected move. And then push back down on Friday and close back inside of the expected move, right below the upper expected range. And for Tesla reported earning, and we basically have the earning expected move up here, the upper range, and also the lower range. And the scenario was if it's going to come down, then we basically look for these point of control, version point of control, as potential support and also trade location for short setup to short it down to the lower expected range, and also this high volume edge up here, and also this version point of control for the long potential long setup to the upper expected range. And as you can see that it kind of chopped around inside of this area. Then after the earning came out the following day, it gapped up and into this resistance area and moved to the expected range and exceeded that expected move for the post-earning. So that's a review of the price action of what have transpired for the ETF and also Apple and Tesla. Here's a look for the coming week on some of the price level and also potential scenario. First of all, looking at the SPY, the ETF for the S&P 500, here are the expected move upper range between 406 and 404, and the lower range would be between 385.50 and 382. In addition to that, on this daily chart, I also added this potential resistance zone up here near the 417 and the 415 area. Now, looking at the 60-minute chart of the SPY here, as you can see, we still have this gap here to get completely filled, and waiting for this price to potentially come up to fill this gap. So for next week, the upside scenario that I will be watching will be come up and get back above this high volume zone here and move up and fill this gap and possibly do a little bit of a back test, then push up to the upper range of the expected move and test this upper volume, this high volume area here, and see what it get in there and test the point of control here, this version point of control at 408.79. Now for the downside, we're basically looking for it to reverse back down to this support resistance zone here that we identify on the daily chart, and see would it be able to hold that. If it's unable to hold that, and we look for this thing to break down and move down toward the lower edge of this high volume area near the 385.50, which is also into the lower expected range. Then we look for a chop down to this potential support resistance zone here, this support area that is identified on the daily chart, and also getting into this upper edge of this high volume area. For the QQQ, I also added this potential resistance zone up here near the 318.40 and also 312.25. These are approximate level, so don't key that in as a absolute level. It's essentially watching this zone here. The upper range for the next week's expected move is between 314 and 312, and the lower range of the expected move will be between 292 to 289. And looking at the 60-minute chart for the QQQ, here is the upside scenario. We're basically looking for the price to hold above this virgin point of control and see would it be able to push up to this composite point of control at 306.65 and chop around a little bit, and then continue to push up to the upper range of the expected move and into this 314.56 area, or essentially get up to this 315 into this resistance zone that we identify on the daily chart, and look for a possibility for it to move to this resistance and get up to this composite point of control. And for the downside scenario, we're essentially looking to see will break this high volume zone and come down to this support resistance turn support area here on the daily chart, and see would it also break this support area and back into this high volume zone here. And if it get into this high volume zone, then we look for a short to short it back down to this lower expected move range here, the lower range, and possibly get down to this virgin point of control at 286.64, and then look for a test of this support zone here at 284.80 near the 285 area. Looking at the IWM, this is the upper range of the expected move for the coming week. It's between 184 and 90, so somewhere around 185 to 184. And the lower range of the expected move will be somewhere around 174 and 172. And also, I added this potential resistance zone up here near the 191.34 and 188.17. Looking at the 60-minute chart for the IWM, so for the upside scenario, we're basically going to watch to see would it be able to hold above this virgin point of control and move up to this resistance zone and break this resistance zone into the upper range of the expected move and get up to this high volume area, chop around and see would it come up to this virgin point of control at 187.92. And essentially come up to this upper resistance zone here between 187 and 191 or so. And for the downside scenario is to watch to see it break below this little bit of a high volume zone area and come into this high volume zone here and see what it come down and trace back down to this lower range of the expected move and essentially break this support resistance zone on the daily chart and see what it move down toward these point of control, this composite point of control, and also this virgin point of control near the 170 here on this composite point of control and 167.5 on this virgin point of control. Now let's take a look at Apple. Apple is scheduled to report earnings, I believe, next Thursday after the market close. So we got to keep an eye on this. The upper range is somewhere around 162, not much of a range. So it's pretty tight. It's somewhere around that 162 area. And the lower range for the expected move is between 146.35 and 144. So just right above this support zone here, this pivot high here, and also put in a potential resistance zone up here near this 166 and 165 area. Now looking at the 60-minute chart for Apple, since Apple is scheduled to report earnings, so it's really kind of tricky to try to trade Apple before earning comes out on Thursday after the market close. But the scenario that I will be keeping an eye on, the potential upside and downside scenario, one of the key level to keep an eye out is this support zone here, down here near just underneath this 152 area, and also this particular composite, point of control. So basically be watching to see would it be able to hold above this zone here, this support area. And if it does, then it break to the upside and if come up and look for these, virgin point of control here, just right above at 158, and also this composite point of control near 159. Then we essentially will be watching it to push up to this 162 expected range if it able to come up and take out these virgin point of control. So the key thing is to see would it be able to hold above this support area. Now for the downside, if it is unable to hold the support area and come in to this high volume zone here, then we will be watching for Apple to come down to this lower range of the expected move between 146 and 144, and then look for this particular support area, this support zone, to see would it be able to hold this support zone, and that is basically the 144 level, and it is unable to hold that, then we be looking at the possibility of Apple coming back down and dip below 140. And here's Tesla. Next week, the upper range for Tesla is projected to be somewhere around 880 to 864.65. And the lower range of the expected move is between 768.80 to 755. And here you could see that the upper range of the expected move is near this potential resistance zone between somewhere around 890 to 874, 875 area. Looking at this 60-minute chart of Tesla, it's sitting right at this high volume zone here, and also this virgin point of control. So for the coming week on the upside scenario, we'll be watching to see would it be able to break above this high volume zone and come up to this resistance area here, this resistance zone, and essentially into this upper range of the expected move between 880 and 865. If we could break this resistance zone, then look for the price to come up to this high volume zone inside of this $900 level. And for the downside scenario, if it is unable to hold this point of control here, this virgin point of control, and dip down and come down to this support area, and we're basically looking for Tesla to see would it be able to hold the support on this lower expected range and get a bounce back up on this resistance or support zone. If it is unable to get a bounce here and dip back inside of this high volume zone here, this high volume zone, then we will be watching to see would it be able to find support down here near the 700 area. We have a composite point of control and also a virgin point of control between 700 and 695. So those are the upside and the downside scenario for Tesla. Now let's take a look at the FAANG stock that are scheduled to report earnings next week. First is Microsoft. It is scheduled to report earnings after the market close on Tuesday. And here is where the market is pricing in for the post-earning move. And the upper range is between 276 to 273 and a quarter. And the lower range is between 247.50 and 243. Now, there are a couple high volume area on the upper end. We see that that's where the market seems to be pricing the upside move on the post earning. You see this high volume area here right underneath the 273.25, and then another high volume area up above the 276. And on the lower end, we see there is a high volume area down here at 247.50, and there's a high volume area at 243. And Google is also scheduled to report earnings after the market close on Tuesday. And here are the price range that the market is pricing in. On the upside for Google is between 117 to 115.45. And on the downside is 140 cents and $99. And the upside seems to be near this high volume zone, the upper edge of this high volume zone near 117.90. And the lower range, it appeared to be inside of this gap here, this gap right down here near the 100 level. So that seems to be where the market is pricing in the movement, post-earning movement for Google. And here's Meta, and what you used to call Facebook. And it is scheduled to report earnings after the market closed on Wednesday. And here are the ranges the market is pricing in. On the upside is between 196 and 189. Now on the downside is 149.50 and 147. So on the upside, it appears that the market is pricing in just right above this, inside of this high volume zone here. And on the downside, it is pretty much down here at these pivot low here, the near these pivot low, and also these pivot here, the support resistance area. And Amazon is also scheduled to report earnings after the market close on Thursday, along with Apple. And here are the price ranges the market is pricing in for the post-earning move. The upper range is 133.50 to 131.22. And the lower range is 113.62 to 112. As you can see that the lower range is pretty much at the lower end of this high volume zone here. And on the upper range, it is near the this low volume zone here, and inside of this small high volume area here. And if we switch to the weekly chart, these are the low volume zone here that I'm referring to on these blue shaded area. So this upper range is up here right between these two low volume area. Those are the scenario for the ETF and also for the FAANG stock, along with the FAANG stock scheduled for earning next week. Now, remember, there is also a FOMC meeting and an interest rate hike announcement on Wednesday of next week. Definitely, we're going to see some volatility in the market for the coming week. Keep an eye out for the video that I will be posting throughout the week. And be sure to smash that thumbs up to help me promote this video on YouTube. Thank you for watching and stay safe.